What's going on, legends? Thanks for tuning in. JP here from JPCaptured. So as you guys know, I'm running the Maxxis Razr MT 772 mud terrain tire. I've had them on my rig for 15,000 Ks, and I honestly think that's enough time for me to now give you guys an honest opinion on how I found these tires thus far. Coming from somebody who isn't sponsored by Maxxis or anything like that, so I don't have any obligation to rate these tires any specific way. So it is just completely an honest review from someone who's used the Maxxis Razrs for the first time. But that doesn't mean this is my first time running a Maxxis tire. I've had the original Bighorn pattern, and then the one after that, the next Bighorn pattern that they made that superseded the original 776, I think it was. I've also run other brands like your BFGs, your Coopers. I've also used the Mickey Thompsons as well. Then some of your cheaper brands like the CF3000s, Sumitomo, Serengetis. I've also used some hardcore mud terrain tires like Super Swampers. I've used TSL Thornbirds as well. Those things had lugs sticking out the sidewall like this big. They were a hardcore off-road tire. So let's talk about some specs of this tire. It is the MT 772 Maxxis Razr. It's a mud terrain tire, so it is designed for an off-road vehicle, and it does have quite an aggressive tread pattern on both the top of the tire and the sidewall as well. Now, talking about the sidewall of this tire, it is in fact a 10-ply sidewall, which is extremely strong. You can definitely get some good off-roading out of this tire without risking the sidewall punches and things like that. It is also a load rating of E, which is really good, and each tire is rated to 1,450 kilos load rating. So because it's a mud terrain tire, guys, generally what you'll find with a muddy is the spacing of the lugs inside this area of the tire, which contacts the road, is obviously going to be wider, spread apart. And that is purely so that the mud or any debris from off-road can basically get its way out of the tire without getting stuck in the tread pattern and clogged up. So if that happens, if you start clogging up the tire with mud, for instance, that really means that the tire becomes like a slick, and it doesn't have all of these lugs to grip onto the surface off-road. So that is the main reason to get a mud terrain, so that you can eject all of the mud and whatever out of the tread pattern so that it can keep gripping and pulling you up the track that you're working on. What you'll find with, say for instance, an all-terrain tire, which is meant to be a mix between off-road and on-road, is these lug spacings will be closer together because it gives you more surface area on the road, which theoretically means that it's a better on-road tire, but not as good in mud and things like that because it usually gets clogged up with mud and clay really easily. So that's why if you do some serious off-roading, you plan on going through mud holes and rocky climbs and things like that, a mud terrain tire is an absolute must to make sure that you don't get stuck or have less chance of getting stuck as well. And something like this is a really good in between. You'll also notice on the side here, we have some good sidewall lugs. Now the beauty about having sidewall lugs is because you don't always just need the grip on top of the tire. You could be in a rut or something like that and the tire's pressed up against the side of that rut, and these lugs will actually dig in and help pull the tire through. And I've noticed that these tires definitely do offer that. They do feel like that they're pulling along when you're in a skinny rut and this tire's jammed up against the outside. It grips and just pulls the vehicle forward as well as the top tread pattern. So sidewall design is awesome. So today, to make things nice and simple, I'm going to rate this tire out of 5 stars basically. So 1 is obviously the worst rating and 5 being the best. Now, I'm mostly going to be focusing in the off-road category, but I will also talk about things like on-road characteristics and on-road noise and things like that. But then when we get into the off-road, I'm going to break it down into things like mud, rock, and just general trail driving. Okay, so let's start with the main reason why people don't buy a mud terrain tire for their vehicle. That's because of road noise, on-road noise from the mud terrain tire with that big lug spacing that they come with. Now I put them on the car and I was surprised. Honestly, I really was surprised with how quiet they were initially. And you know what? After a few thousand Ks, they got even quieter. I'm guessing that's because the tread and the compound maybe changed a little bit in the way that it was. I barely notice that I've got muddies on, except for when you're slowing up for, say, a set of lights or something like that. Sometimes, depending on the road surface as well, when you take off, you can hear them gripping a little bit differently and things like that. But cruising down the highway, general driving, touring, they're not noisy at all in the cab. Even my missus can tolerate them. She doesn't even notice that we've got muddies on the car. So I'm going to give these suckers a 4 out of 5. For a mud terrain tire, they are extremely quiet, and if you do a lot of on-road driving like I do, as well as off-roading and touring and things like that, this is a really good in-between option. So let's review this tire for mud. Now, this was prominently designed as a mud terrain tire, obviously by Maxxis when they designed the tread pattern, and it does a fantastic job when clearing mud out of this tread. And that's exactly what you want a mud terrain to do. You want it to have a good lug design where it does grip in the mud, but obviously clears all the mud and clay out really well so that you can continue to grip up the trail. So far, they have blown me away, guys. Honestly, other people, when I look at their tires and they've got clay or mud stuck in them and they're starting to slick up the tire, the Maxxis, when I review the videos and look back, they've still got at very least the top of the tread showing and it's still gripping up the track. I can feel it in the car. When I'm driving up a hill or something like that, a mud climb, I can feel them still gripping and I can hear them gripping. These grip really well in mud. I've been super impressed, which is exactly what I bought them for. I'm gonna give them a 4 out of 5 stars, guys. The reason why I don't give them a 5 out of 5 is because they're not like a Maxxis Trepador or an iRock or a TSL Thornbird, Super Swamper, Bogger, a tire like that, which is prominently just an off-road design tire. So let's talk about rocks. Now, this tire wasn't really designed for rock work as the compound isn't extremely soft, which is good for on-road, okay? So like I said before, there are some specific off-road tires which would perform better in this area, and they do. Honestly, they do grip better on rock if they've got a very soft compound. But I was pleasantly surprised when you let the PSI down in these tires and let them bag out. I've done some pretty technical rock climbs with these so far, and they do grip really well. And if it's shaly rock, you know, loose rock on a track or something like that, I can actually feel the tire picking up the rock in a tread and just spitting it out the back, ejecting the rock straight out, but gripping and moving the tire forward, using those rocks to do it. So the tread itself, being not a super soft compound, which is good as an all-rounder, performs extremely well in rock for what it is. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars in rocky conditions. I would say if you don't let the PSI out of these tires and have them up at road running PSI pressures, it might not be that good. They'll probably slip a bit off road. So definitely let the PSI down in order to do rock work, rock climbs and things like that. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been able to test my Maxxis Razrs in snow or sand. This year's snow season, I couldn't get out in it because of COVID-19, the lockdown, which really sucked. So I will do a sand and snow review later on with these tires to give you my feedback on how they go in those conditions. So let's talk about the on-road performance from the Maxxis Razrs. Now, technically speaking, a mud terrain tire is never going to perform extremely well on tarmac. However, I have to be fair and review this on-road because it is designed as an on-road, off-road tire, not purely just off-road. So, in wet and dry conditions, the tire performs really well. Again, guys, it's blowing me away. So in dry conditions, it's really good. I can feel it gripping. I can feel it working around corners and things like that. I don't have any problems with it in the dry. And in the wet, where I have had issues before with mud terrain tires, it doesn't let me down either. Turning corners really sharply in the wet, even after heavy downpours and maybe there's a bit of oil on the road and things like that, they still grip relatively well. I don't feel unsafe driving around with them, even though my ute doesn't have a lot of weight in the back of it. It still grips really well. If you had these on a wagon or a ute with a canopy or more weight in the back of it, they would be even better than how they perform in my car. So for on-roading in dry conditions, I'm going to give them a 5 out of 5 stars for a mud terrain tire, guys, because I have absolutely zero problems with them in dry conditions on road. In the wet though, I'm gonna have to bump a star rating off that and put it back down to 4. There have been times when these tires have broken traction in the wet, and I have felt the back try to kick out a little bit. But to be honest with you, all in all, if the roads are wet, I generally don't have to change my driving style that much, even turning corners, takeoff and things like that. They're pretty darn good for a mud terrain tire. So another main reason why people avoid a mud terrain tire for a vehicle that's prominently used on the road is excessive tread wear. Now, some people also go to the extent of buying a set of mud terrain tires for off-road and then have their road tires for daily driving, and they swap them out before they head off-road. For me, I can't be bothered to do that, to be honest with you, so I really just want to run my mud terrain tire 100% of the time on my vehicle. So, as I said, I've done 15,000 Ks on my Maxxis Razrs so far. Now, this is a brand new Maxxis Razr, this is my spare, so I'm going to measure the tread depth with a set of vernier calipers on this tyre and then compare it to the rear tyre and the front tyre on my vehicle. Okay, so it looks like I'm registering about 16 millimeters of tread depth there on the brand new tyre, so let's compare that to the used ones on the vehicle. So here we are at the back of the vehicle. I'm going to do the exact same measurement on the same lug. Okay, so I've got just a shade over 12 millimeters reading on the back tire. So that means that I've used roughly 4 millimeters of tread in 15,000 Ks. It's not bad going considering a lot of that driving has been on the road in particular. I've got a reading of 13 millimeters of tread left on the front tire. It's probably not as much difference as I thought there would be, to be honest with you. So that's actually really good. So I've only used 3 millimeters of tread in 15,000 Ks on the front tire. Okay guys, so something else to take into consideration when you're changing the size of the tyre on your vehicle is how fast the vehicle is travelling. And what I mean by that is the speedo on your vehicle is going to show a certain speed, but the vehicle is actually going to be travelling usually at a faster speed if you've gone up in tyre size than what the dash is displaying. So for instance, my 295 70s 17s changed the speedo by about 8 kilometers. So what I mean by that is the speedo showing, say for instance, 100 kilometers per hour, but the vehicle is actually traveling at roughly 108 kilometers per hour. So without being able to correct the speedo on these vehicles, I don't think there's a speedo corrector out there yet for them. If there is, let me know because I will get one. But you need to take that in consideration. So you either need to get like a heads-up speedo display for the windscreen, something like that, like an aftermarket product or something that can show you how fast you're traveling, or something like a GPS unit will also show you vehicle speed. But you need to make sure you take that into consideration or you're going to rack up a lot of speeding fines. I'm just going to talk a little bit about wheel offsets. Now, the wheels that I'm running on this vehicle, the Allied Woofs, now they're a 17 by 9 positive 30 offset. So the rim diameter is 17 inches, the rim width is 9 inches, and the offset of the center of the hub to the wheel is positive 30. So positive 30 and say for instance negative 30, the difference between that is positive is going to pull it further in towards the vehicle itself and negative is going to pull it further out. And that 30 is basically in millimeters. So if it was positive 20, positive 10, that would be a 10 millimeter increment difference between them, and that's how far it sticks out. So it's pretty straightforward when you start breaking things down. Now, we need to also talk about the rim width because that does make a big difference as well. So this is a 9-inch wheel. If you've got other popular ones out there like the 8-inch or the 8.5 inch wheels, so that's basically in the inch measurements. So 25 mil difference between, you know, an 8-inch and a 9-inch wheel. So I'll put a tyre calculator on the screen for you now so you can see what I used. That basically allows you to calculate the tyre that you're going from to the new tyre and wheel package that you're about to put on the vehicle. So you can then check out in that little diagram that it shows you there, showing you the difference with the offset and how far the wheel is going to be poking in or out of the vehicle off the wheel hub. So something like that is really important to use to make sure you get your calculations properly done, so that when you select your wheel and tyre package, you don't end up with a rude shock where the wheel's sort of in too far or out too far of the vehicle. It's just right, exactly what you're looking for. So to summarize this video, guys, obviously I'm extremely stoked with the Maxxis Razrs. They are a fantastic off-road, on-road tyre with great characteristics on road, which is obviously a massive benefit for all of us that use our vehicles daily, and off-road. So far, they've blown me away with their performance. So in my opinion, I would definitely say you can spend your hard-earned dollars on a set of Maxxis Razrs, and I don't think you're going to find too many problems with them, and you're going to be extremely stoked. So definitely give them a go, guys. I think compared to other big name brands that I've run in the past, these kick ass. Okay, and the measurements are slightly different, but probably not as much as I thought it would be. So there is a millimeter difference. I'm coming up with just around 13 millimeters of tread on the front tires. So therefore I've used about 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters. Okay, so I've got a reading of 13 millimeters.